How's everyone doing? Today I'm going to be doing a video on the top 10 horror movies that need a Blu-ray release. And let me know what you think of my list, if you've seen any of them, and what movies would be on your list for the top 10 horror movies that need a Blu-ray release. There's been so many great horror movies released on Blu-ray recently, but there's still so many more great horror movies that deserve a Blu-ray release. And I'm only counting the ones that don't play on Region A. For example, Fright Night 2 recently got a release in Spain, and there's a digibook in Germany as well, so that's off the list because even though they're in other countries, they can still be played in the US and they can be imported. Now, I'm not including The Thing from Another World because it does have a Japanese Blu-ray release. Even though I heard the transfer was terrible, it still has a release that can play in the US. The same thing with Frontiers, which I believe has a Swedish and Norwegian release, and it was confirmed that it could play on Region A players, so that can't be on the list as well. So I'm only including movies that don't have a Blu-ray release that can be played in the US. So even though the movie might not have a release in the US, if it has a release in another country that can be played in the US, it's off the list. But now let's get on to the list for the top 10 horror movies that need a Blu-ray release. Let's get into it. First up at the number 10 spot is the French infected film Mutants, which is such an underrated movie. For me, this is one of the most underrated horror movies out there. I never hear anybody talk about this one. It has great gore effects. It has a washed out hue to the film which reflects the bleak tone. It's basically about a couple, a woman who's pregnant and then a guy, and it's in a post-apocalyptic infected world where the infected usually take a couple days to turn and become bloodthirsty savages. And the guy gets infected and they hole up in this abandoned building. She's a nurse and she's trying to figure out a way to kind of save him and stop him from becoming this infected person. This has a fantastic snowy setting as well as the building that it's in too. There's all kinds of different halls and corridors, so that makes for some really tense chase sequences. And again, there's other infected people in there too. So very tense, very underrated, and definitely needs a Blu-ray release. And I also like how it has a bit of morality if she's able to kill her lover, even though he's turning into a infected person. And so I like that tale of morality too, and how to deal with that. At the number 9 spot is the Clive Barker classic Rawhead Rex, a great Irish horror movie set in Ireland as well, which I think really lends itself to a great feel. A lot of different places where he can hide and great scenery too. And Rawhead Rex does have a little bit of a cheesy look, but it's cheesy, gory, horror, action, fun. Some awesome kills in here. Just a crazy creature right there, Rawhead Rex, which is this giant creature that goes around killing people and terrorizing everybody. And really awesome, fun one that definitely needs a Blu-ray release. It's cheesy, but awesome. And next up at the number 8 spot is Pen, an excellent psychological horror movie from Canada. This one is so creepy, and it reminds me a lot of Psycho, and I love the final shot to this film. It's basically about a brother and sister, and once their parents pass away in a car accident, the brother becomes really attached to the sister, as well as becoming overly attached to his new best friend, Pen, which right there is the anatomical dummy which was used in their father's doctor's office. And suddenly strange things start happening and people start getting killed. And Pen is the lead suspect. Again, such a creepy look to the anatomical doll. Very lifelike. You can see, the organs and all the anatomy. And really creepy, tense moments all throughout, especially with the brother who is so excellent in that role. Very unnerving, especially being so creepy with the sister and the attachment with the doll. It all works well. Such an underrated film and a great psychological horror movie from Canada. Definitely needs a Blu-ray release, and would highly recommend this film as well as all of these films. But this is another one that I feel like doesn't get enough recognition. And the number 7 spot is Todd Browning's 1932 classic Freaks. It was a kind of controversial movie because he used real life freaks in here. And this one is just so creepy, but also a little bit sad and sympathetic towards the characters and how they were treated, and the ending just stays with you long after viewing. The ending, when I first saw this when I was younger, just gave me nightmares, just freaked me the heck out. And then the one scene one of us, Gooble Gobble, we accept her, Google Gobble, one of us. Another unforgettable scene. So many awesome moments in here, and this is an all-time horror classic, great 1930s horror movie. Fantastic acting in here too, very tense moments, and it's shocking that this one does not have a Blu-ray release. It's an all-time classic that definitely deserves a proper Blu-ray release treatment right there. Amazingly disturbing and epic, and again directed by Todd Browning, who the year before directed Dracula in 1931. So a fantastic director in the horror genre. Next up at the number 6 spot is the Norwegian film Cold Prey 2, which this is by far the best in the film franchise. The first one was really good, but the second one is just phenomenal. It's a great combination of horror settings as well, with the snowy setting and then the hospital setting. So you get a lot of dark lit corridors and halls and chase sequences. It reminds me a bit of Halloween with Michael Myers and just kind of that ominous feeling. And again, those are two of my favorite settings for horror movies, the hospital and then snowy settings. So it has both of those in spades, and it just works incredibly. It's a pretty straightforward slasher, but one of the better ones of modern times. And I like how this one goes a little bit more into the backstory of the killer too. Really tense moments in here, some good kill scenes. Just a phenomenal film, and definitely deserves a proper Blu-ray release. And at number 5 spots is Critters. How does this not have a Blu-ray release? Ghoulies 1 and 2 has a double feature Blu-ray release, and this one definitely deserves it. I would love to see Ghoulies, all the films, get a Blu-ray release, as well as all the Critters films too. And Leonardo DiCaprio was even in the Critters franchise. So how can this not have a Blu-ray release with such great names attached to it? But this one right here is just a lot of fun. It's cheesy horror and at its best, essentially. You've got Dee Wallace in here as the mother, and it's basically about these bounty hunters from space who can basically take the form or the face of anybody or anything, and they're hunting down these creatures right here, the Critters, who escape from this space jail and come to Earth, and they're tracking them down. And of course the Critters are these little furry creatures that can kill people and eat people, and they have these little spikes that can, you know, poison people as well. And there's a scene where one of the critters gets big and becomes like a giant critter, which is really awesome too. And again, it's another example of aliens coming down to a small town. You know, there's a farmhouse, which is utilized in so many different kind of movies like that, but it really works here. And some really cool shots in here. I like the ending too, and the one character in here is so crazy and wacky. And again, the bounty hunters can take the shape and the look of anybody, so that happens a few times with different characters. And I love the beginning transformation scene too, the very first one. I thought that was really cool. And the critters are just awesome creatures in general, horror creatures, so this one definitely deserves a Blu-ray release. Excellent, cheesy, entertaining 80s horror. Next up at the number 4 spot is The Hitcher, another example of a great, intense, palpable 80s horror movie. Rutger Hauer was just a phenomenal villainous character. You've got C. Thomas Howell, and then you've got Jennifer Jason Leigh. C. Thomas Howell picks up this hitchhiker, Rutger Hauer, and he finds out that he's a crazy serial killer. And at one point, C. Thomas Howell gets framed for the murders, and there's a cat and mouse game going on, and just super tense moments in this one. Rutger Hauer was just phenomenal in this performance, and definitely deserves a Blu-ray release. Just an excellent one. I remember watching this one all the time as a kid, and I still got the snapper case DVD right here. We don't need that. We need the Blu-ray release. And next up at my number 3 spot is Fire in the Sky. Now this one isn't technically horror, but there are some horrifying scenes in this movie, and this movie is the movie that scared me the most. I couldn't watch this movie for years afterwards. It's based on a supposedly true story of an alien abduction, and the alien abduction scene once he's on the ship is terrifying. When he's on the table, just everything that happens in that, it just still to this day freaks me out thinking about it. And so incredibly well acted. D.B. Sweeney is the lead here, Robert Patrick, Craig Sheffer, Peter Berg, James Garner, just a phenomenal cast, and just a horrifying movie, again, especially when they're on the alien ship, and then when he gets on the operating table, just so freaky, and definitely deserves a Blu-ray release as well. And at my number 2 spot is my favorite evil killer kid movie, and that is Who Can Kill a Child, also known as Island of the Damned, a fantastic Spanish horror movie. It's basically about a young couple who goes to this secluded island, and once they get to the island, they see there's really no adults around, and then they see there's all these kids that apparently kill the adults. And this is another tale of morality. Again, even in the title, can you kill a child, you know, to save your own life? And again, the wife in here is pregnant, much like in Mutants, which is another one where it has a pregnant female lead. And there's some terrifying moments in here, super tense, again, very palpable. And this definitely deserves a Blu-ray release as well. For me, the best evil killer kid movie out there. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend Who Can Kill a Child, although I prefer the title of Island of the Damned, and even the old school poster artwork was awesome for that. I would love to see a Blu-ray release with that artwork instead of this artwork right here. And there was a recent remake of this too, which has a Blu-ray release, and that remake was awful. This is definitely the one to check out. Such an incredible movie. And in my number one spot for horror movies that need a Blu-ray release is the Poughkeepsie Tapes. And this one is one of the movies that freaked me out the most. For me, it's the best found footage movie ever. Totally disturbing and so incredibly well done. The final shot of this movie just stays with you. There are some really creepy segments and scenes in here, and I love how they tie it into actual news stories. And I used to live right by Poughkeepsie, New York, which is where the setting of this was. It's basically about a serial killer, and they find all these tapes, and they go through the tapes, and they see him recording all of his kills and all of his depravity, and kidnaps this one girl and tortures her, and it's got some great psychological horror elements going on. It's kind of a mixture of the, you know, faux documentary style. They have all these, you know, investigators and psychiatrists and psychologists and police officers going over the case. And this film doesn't have any release. This is a bootleg right here. And for whatever reason, it doesn't have a release. It was made in 2007, 10 years later, still no release. And the writer and director are brothers here, John Eric Dowdle and Drew Dowdle, and they worked on films like M. Night Shyamalan's Devil, Quarantine, which of course was the remake of Wreck, and As Above, So Below. So they've got some great works and examples of horror movies that actually already have Blu-ray releases. And they even did No Escape, which is a thriller movie that has a Blu-ray release. So I have no idea what's holding up the Poughkeepsie Tapes from getting an official release. It doesn't have a DVD release or a Blu-ray release, but definitely deserves it. I would love to see this one. This is, for me, the best found footage movie out there. So many disturbing moments that stay with you long after viewing. Again, especially the ending. I just kept thinking about the ending like days after watching this. Love the heck out of this movie and definitely deserves a Blu-ray release. So there you go. Those are my top 10 horror movies that need a Blu-ray release. Let me know what you think of my list if you've seen any of the movies, and what horror movies would be on your list for the top 10 horror movies that need a Blu-ray release. Let me know in a comment or video response down below, and hope everyone's doing well. Take care.